A Divided Mind, written by BILITER, read by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Tara. When Branson was little, he always did everything first. I glanced at the silver-haired man dressed in black slacks and a white shirt. He sat with his long legs crossed and a legal pad on his lap. His attire, like his demeanor, was monotone. He acknowledged me with a slight nod, the same gesture I gave when I interviewed a college applicant to indicate I was, indeed, actually listening. He had just turned a year old, and it was the anniversary of my father's death. I remember because my dad died right after the twins were born, and all these firsts happened together. I was in the kitchen baking something for my mom. I shrugged. It's just what I did. Anyway, we lived in a condo, and the kitchen was super small, but suddenly Branson appeared in the doorway. I managed to smile, and the man nodded again. I remember looking over the kitchen counter for Branson's twin brother, but Aaron was still on the blanket where I left him, gumming some toy. Even though they're identical, they're nothing alike. I paused, the awareness of that truth feeling as hollow as it sounded. Anyway, I shook my head. Branson must have crawled up into the kitchen because there he was, and then he stood up. My hand went to my chest. It was amazing. He was so proud of himself. Then he moved toward me. I dropped the kitchen towel and held up my arms because he had never walked. But I knew. Tears flooded my eyes, and the only thing I could see was the 16-year-old memory. I knew he was going to fall, so I reached out for him. And now I bit my lip to stop it from trembling, but I couldn't quell the inferno that threatened to erupt, drown me, and wipe out my family. I see him falling, and I want to catch him, but I don't know how. I lowered my head. My throat burned, raw from mourning every dream I had for my child that vanished with one phone call. Mom, when you get home, I need to talk to you about something. What? Even now, I can hear my exasperation, the agitation from being bothered at work. It's nothing. Can we talk about it when you get home? Branson, my tone became more parental, more authoritative. It didn't evoke a response from my teenager. Bran, you have to tell me. You can't do this. Can't leave me to wonder. I have a class to teach, and I won't be home for a few hours. What's going on? I exhaled loudly enough for him to hear. What I heard in reply reawakened a maternal instinct that had gone dormant once my sons outgrew the dangers of electrical outlets and choking hazards. It's nothing. His voice was flat, emotionless. We can talk about it later. No, tell me, what's going on? Are you in trouble? I held my breath while my heart beat so loudly I heard it in my ear. Mom, it's just that... What? My mind raced. Pregnant girlfriend, drugs, failing a class, fight at school. Branson! There was a moment when the life I had envisioned for my child was still intact. I'm hearing voices. And then it was gone. Chapter 2, Branson. So, Branson, tell me why you're here. What do you mean, why am I here? You know why I'm here. Because I fucked up. I blacked out in school and came to with bloody knuckles. I rested my left foot over my right thigh, leaned back in my chair, and said, I'm just going through some stuff right now. You want to be more specific? The therapist had to be in his 50s, no hair, overweight, heart attack waiting to happen, and his clothes weren't right for a high school counselor, way too formal, along with his name, Clive? Oh, brother. I pulled on a loose thread on my frayed, faded jeans and looked at him without emotion. I don't feel what other people do. Can you give me an example? I don't feel happiness, excitement, basic emotions that make you happy. They're gone. His office was surrounded by white painted bricks like everything in the high school. But even if they dismantled the school brick by brick as the construction crews outside were loudly and disruptively doing daily in the school's grand remodeling scheme, it wouldn't change the structure. Some institutions couldn't be updated because they'd always be filled with memories of the people who have come through the hallways. Well, Clive paused like he was carefully considering something. The emergency intake counselor had it spot on with depression. This time he leaned forward and the confusion on his face was there before he said it. I'm just surprised she diagnosed you with post-traumatic stress disorder. Fucking awesome. I shifted in the uncomfortable side chair in his office and glanced at the framed picture of some Asian girl on his desk. Probably his daughter. Adopted? Or maybe his wife. Asian? If there's any reason why you think you have post-traumatic disorder, at a very young age I was exposed to violence in my home by my father. The response was instinctive. My past was part of my identity. I wore it the same way I wore number 18 on my track speed suit. Had for as long as I could remember. But, I broke script, since it happened so long ago, I doubt that's the case. I don't think it's PTSD. Then what do you think it is? I hate questions. You're the therapist. You should already know the answer. I'm not sure. Clive leaned back in his chair and glanced at his computer like there was something on it, but I couldn't see it to be sure. Then he wrote something on his notepad, flipped back through the pages, and I waited. I'm always fucking waiting. I can see where she got the PTSD, but I don't think that's that. Didn't we just cover this? For Christ's sakes, I just want to leave. I'm hot, angry, and this guy's fucking irritating. Treating the depression is key, because it's like a train on its tracks. Once it falls off the tracks, it never quite gets back up. It'll just continue to get worse as the tracks get older and are left unattended. Okay, dude, I understand it can get worse. That's why I'm here, so it won't. Still, as annoyed as he was, there was a problem about him that I liked. Maybe it was the dragon posters in his office, but there was no doubt my mind was off the rails. Besides the depression, let's talk about what happened at school last week. I put both feet on the ground, rested my elbows on my knees, leaned forward and stared at him. I don't remember what happened. I just remember coming to in the bathroom with bloody knuckles. Do you remember anything before that? My stare intensified. Not at all. Clive typed something on his computer and then sat back in his chair. It looked more comfortable than mine, but the guy was seriously pushing the suspension. He had to be like 250 plus? I read that you had a disagreement with a classmate. Yeah, some girl in my poli-sci class was using some language I didn't agree with toward one of the foreign exchange students. Well, what did she say? The girl was bugging this kid because he was saying Negro and she is partially black. I guess. I don't know. She looks white to me, but I shrugged. She flipped a bitch on this kid and said, you need to fuck off and quit saying that word. But he's from Spain and they use Negro to refer to the color black. He didn't mean it to be offensive. It's a cultural thing. But she flipped out, and that's the last thing I remember. Clive's round face made one of his blackish brown eyes look bigger than the other. He was like the Escher painting. When this girl in your class got upset with the foreign exchange student, do you remember what you felt? Anger. Clive nodded. And when you get angry, what happens? I black out. What was it about this girl or this situation that angered you? Just the way she was speaking to him. I leaned back and gripped the armrest of the chair until whatever fingernails I had left dug into the fake leather. She was being mean. Well, that could be said about many situations in high school. What was different about this one? I tightened my hold on the chair and looked at Clive. He leaned forward and his gut hung over his pants. The line on his forehead crinkled like he was genuinely interested in what I had to say, like it really mattered. Look, I said, ready for him to change his position about me, ready for him to lose interest, but the sincerity on his face never wavered. I loosened my grip and spoke directly to him. She was being really mean, and this kid... I paused and my voice lost its anger. He couldn't defend himself. Clive seemed to chill and slightly smiled. Understood. He studied me with his eyes. And the bloody knuckles? I relaxed against the back of the chair and shrugged. I guess I punched the bathroom wall. A full smile broke on Clive's face. Better the wall, then. I would never hurt someone. I couldn't seem to get across to anyone who would listen to me or actually hear me that while I may have been losing my grip on reality, I wasn't going to lose my shit on someone else. I took my anger out on the bathroom wall. And you hurt yourself in the meantime. I rolled my eyes. It's kind of like saying if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it still make a sound? Clive shook his head. If you don't remember punching cinder block, does your hand still hurt afterward? And the answer would be, it hurt like hell. When Clive laughed, his whole body shook. That made me smile, but then as if on cue, my blistered and scabbed over knuckles began to sting. They itch real bad, I said, glancing at my bruised fist. But my mom told me to leave them alone or it would stop the healing process. How is that even possible? I looked at my therapist. Sometimes she makes up the craziest shit just so we won't do something. You've got a great sense of humor, he said with a chuckle. I shrugged. Sometimes you gotta laugh at this shit or it'll drive you crazy. He nodded. So let's talk about your other symptoms. How long have you had these voices? Since around 8th grade, but I never said anything to anyone because I thought maybe they'd go away. But they've never been this bad before. He scribbled something on his notepad. Yeah, do the math. It's going on 5 years now. 5 years of suffering. It's been a slow build, so actually 5 long years of slowly suffering. Did they tell you to hurt yourself, to hurt others? No. My tone was sharp and piercing, like one of the many knives I collected. Knives I had to give my mom when I told her about the static in my head. I stared at him. I would never intentionally hurt myself or someone else. How often do these voices occur? Most every day. I didn't quite feel like a punch to the gut when I admitted it that time. When I told my mom about the static, it hurt like a pain I'd never felt. I never wanted to have to tell anyone. I could see the sadness in her green eyes, but I just couldn't live with it anymore. Now, about these intrusive thoughts, can you tell me about them? I wouldn't like to. You don't have to go into detail, but every little bit helps. They're very violent, and it happens at least twice a day at any time. The fear came back that I'd be judged and locked up, that I'd be alone. The Paxil will help with the depression, but sometimes once that's treated, the other symptoms become more pronounced. Fucking awesome. So if that happens, if you start to hear more voices or hear more intrusive thoughts, come see me. I nodded. Dr. Cordova will be overseeing your psychiatric care, but it's a dual-prong approach with medication and counseling. I just stared at him. It can be tricky, especially in the beginning when they're trying to figure out the best dosage of medication. We'll be working together with Dr. Cordova to determine a course of treatment that works for you. How does that sound? Like I wish I hadn't said anything. If there's not a pill to shut off the static, then why the fuck am I here? Sure, thanks. All right then, this was a good start. Is there anything else I should know? He glanced at the wall clock and I knew our time was up. It was nice meeting you. I stood up and so did he. At 6'1", I was taller by him by maybe an inch, but he easily outweighed me. Thanks for your help in walking me through this. I actually meant what I said, and I think he saw it in my eyes. You're very welcome. He firmly shook my hand. I'll see you very soon. If you ever need anything, just come by my office. I opened the door and was thrust into the hallway of my high school, surrounded by the chaos of people running around, trying to get to their next class. The noise was a welcome relief, because for a minute it shut out the static. Chapter 3, Tara. It's Wyoming. It's not like there's a plethora of choices for child psychiatry. Tara, he's not a child. Branson's 17. I looked at the ceiling of my car and wanted to punch through it. Instead, I gripped my cell phone until it felt like my knuckles would bleed. Ed, I know how old our son is. My point is that there aren't a lot of psychiatrists who treat adolescents, especially in Wyoming. In Sheridan there are. We could have Branson in with one of the best shrinks in town. My jaw tightened. Well, the children and I live in Casper. Sheridan's a bit too far to travel. I was pretty sure he grunted over the phone. Asshole. Well, in Casper, Dr. Cordova is supposed to be the best, he said. I blew out a mouthful of hot air. And he normally has a 2-month waiting list. I only got him in because the school called after Branson blacked out and he was hurt when they found him in the boys' restroom. I closed my eyes, but my son's mangled and bloodied fists remained. I had held his hand up to my lips and kissed it, something I had done many times when Branson was a toddler and hurt himself. But he wasn't little anymore, and there was no salve to take away the pain in his eyes. Yes, Branson told me he was sticking up for someone. I opened my eyes. The parking lot to Wyoming State University was empty, and the sky was beginning to darken. The aspen had lost their leaves. Their naked branches looked like spindly fingers poking through the starless night. The clock on the dashboard read 5, but it was getting darker earlier, and it felt later. Carson and Jack, my younger children, were home alone. What the hell am I doing here? Tara, who was Branson sticking up for? And then I remembered I was alone in the car. in the college parking lot at work because I didn't want Carson to hear me on the phone with his father, and then for Jack to miss his, who never called. What a train wreck. 4 children from 2 different fathers. How did I end up with this? Tara, hello? Branson thought a foreign exchange student was being ridiculed, so he spoke up. And then I shrugged because I didn't really know the end of the story. I only knew Branson left the classroom, and then the vice principal found him in the bathroom. Branson thinks he punched the bathroom wall, I guess. There was blood. I couldn't finish the sentence, nor could I break down to the one man who was the least safe of me to be vulnerable around. Oh my God. Tears poured out of me like rain. I couldn't stop or predict when it would happen. I only knew that since my son told me he was hearing voices, I hadn't been able to get a handle on my emotions. I couldn't control my feelings, and my son feared he didn't have any. Though, when he told me about the static, his face grew ashen and his broad shoulders seemed to fold in on him like the weight of the world was bearing down. He looked like a wounded bird, and the pain on his face was something I would never forget.